We're gonna have a conversation around three main topics, so you have an idea. We're gonna talk about current issues in Puerto Rico. So obviously, like we'll talk about energy, we'll talk about La Junta, the Financial Oversight Management Board, and maybe if we have some time about education, that I know is something important for many of the students here. Then we're gonna dedicate most of the time to the most important topic for us, I think for me, for organization, maybe for Juan, and maybe for some of you, that is the topic of the colonial relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States and the colonization efforts around it. And then we're gonna finish with a third topic that is gonna be electoral politics, talking about the general elections in 2024 and the possibility of political alliances that I know many of you are very excited, about. So that sounds good, Juan?
Sounds right, I think.
And then, very important, we're gonna leave half an hour. You'll tell me when 7:20 or something like that, because we start a little late. So we're gonna leave half an hour for a Q&A with all of you. Like, we want to be very transparent. We want to have a discussion. And I know Juan wants to hear from all of you. So, we'll have that half an hour of Q&A. Before starting with the conversation, I also want Juan for you to give some welcome remarks. We'll start.
Well, first of all, thank you, Adil. Thank you, everybody, being here. To the organization that invited me. It's also a pleasure to be here with you. And after that introduction, I think I can retire and go home. And I've done enough. I'm kidding, but one caveat. My first language is Spanish, so my English is a little bit rusty. So bear with me. No, but thank you very much. I'm really looking forward for this dialogue.
Of course. I'm also a Spanish native speaking. So, we're
Probably we're gonna go
exactly
at some point to
maybe we do Spanglish a little bit, but we want to be very open because we want to inform, especially people that are also not from Puerto Rico. So that's why we're doing also part of this. So let's start talking about current issues in Puerto Rico. Good thing we have Juan lives in Puerto Rico. He's coming from Puerto Rico. So in our perspective, an organization that was formed in 2017 following Hurricane Maria. We're in constant, most of our family is in Puerto Rico. We're constantly looking at the news in Puerto Rico. It seems the energy issue is one or the main issue for Puerto Ricans, at least in the last 5 years. Hurricane Irma, Maria, the earthquakes, now Fiona, the collapse of the grid. For those who don't know, after Maria, Puerto Rico had the longest blackout in US history. It was the second longest in the history of the world, just following one in the Philippines. So I want you to talk about a little bit about the day-to-day struggles of Puerto Ricans with the collapse of the energy grid. And recently we know that it was privatized, at least the transmission and distribution of the electric system. Has that improved the electric system? And if not, what is the alternative to Luma, that is the privatizing company?
Well, it hasn't. I mean, things have gotten worse with the electric system. Actually, a couple of days ago, when Governor Pedro Pierluisi announced that he was going to renew the contract with Luma Energy, which is a private company that is administering the transmission and distribution of energy in Puerto Rico, that same day, during the evening, there was 175,000 people that lost energy around the island because of the problems that we are dealing with. That represents 16% of consumers of energy in Puerto Rico. So you ask how that affects the day-to-day in Puerto Rico. Well, some of the topics that you mentioned, economic issues, health services, education, is always destabilized. Is that a word? I'm gonna make up some words. For example, the first day of school, when this semester started, a lot of schools couldn't start classes because they didn't have energy. Some hospitals, for example, on the private sector and the public sector had been affected on the services, and people have died because of blackouts that are very common in Puerto Rico right now. And even though the service is worse, since Luma Energy has been in charge of distribution and transmission, the rates of energy in Puerto Rico have been improving. I mean, it's been more costly, higher, like 7 times higher than before Luma Energy took charge. So it's had affected the economy, it had affected health services, and obviously it had affected the education in Puerto Rico, and that's our day-to-day. People, I mean, you know how we are Puerto Ricans. So when there is like a cloudy day with, I mean, it's the probability of rain, people say, I'm just waiting to know at which time I'm gonna lose energy today in my home or my small businesses. And it's a hard thing to face day to day. You don't know what's gonna happen. And the cost of, for example, the cost of having to use electric generators in your houses and in your businesses, it increases the cost of living in Puerto Rico. So it also affects the family and affects small and medium businesses in the island.
What about Luma then? Is that, that is the option? Because we know like it was privatized. For those of you that don't know, there was a congressional hearing today here in the US House of Representatives. Governor Pierluisi, testified. He's here. We were hoping that he could come here, and we'll invite him to like talk a little bit, but there was a hearing today and it was around the topic of energy, the rebuilding. There was a representative of Luma, like, is Luma the alternative? And if it is not, because we hear a lot of groups, political parties like you saying that Luma is not the alternative. So what is the alternative then? Going back to PREPA, PREPA was the public corporation, the Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica that had the electric system for many decades. What is the alternative?
Well, Luma is not the alternative. First of all, because from my point of view, I think access to energy, it should be treated as a fundamental right, as a human right. And actually, the UN, United Nations, have declared that access to energy equals access to quality of life, and is considered one of the aspects, under the umbrella of human rights. So the idea of privatize the electric system in Puerto Rico, it wasn't a good idea. When I was a senator, there was a bill that actually opened the door for the private sector to take control of distribution and transmission right now, but generation of power is next. The idea that private companies are going to control the access to energy, I don't think that's the way to manage the crisis and to deal with it. What happened? Let me tell you a story. The Puerto Rico Power Authority was on public hands. It was a public corporation. And at first, when it was created in the 30s, it was called Autoridad de Fuentes Fluviales. And it was created to guarantee that the people of Puerto Rico had access to electricity. Years passed, and then it was transformed to the PREPA, which we all know, which is Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica. And it became a political party's haven. I mean, if you were for the Popular Democratic Party or from the New Progressive Party, you had access to jobs, to executive positions. They used the budget of the Power Authority to advance political parties' interests. Actually, some people were organized as energéticos progresistas, which is a group of workers or executives that only responded to the new Progressive Party, and energéticos populares, which were those who only responded to the Popular Democratic Party. That created an environment that politicized the power authority, and then the consequence, which was the bankruptcy of the public corporation. When Maria struck in Puerto Rico, there was a determination by the federal government to rebuild the electric system in Puerto Rico, and they managed to say, well, we're gonna give you we're going to allocate $10 billion to rebuild the electric system in Puerto Rico. And then 2 private companies went to solicit to participate and to get their hands on the $10 billion that were appropriated. Those 2 companies, ADCO and Quanta, when I'm exaggerating, but I think this is what went on. They both went to compete for the contract of privatizing the electric system, but they looked at each other and they said, why do we have to compete? Why don't we create one company for the benefit of both of us? And that's how Luma was created. Luma is a new company, Luma Energy, which was formed by ADCO and Quanta to get access to the $10 billion, and the government gave them the contract. They didn't have the expertise, they didn't have the knowledge of the electric system in Puerto Rico. Those of you who were born in Puerto Rico, raised in Puerto Rico, know that our topography is very complex. And if you have people at the rural areas, it's hard to get electricity there, services there. If you're a private company, that costs money. And if you don't treat access to electricity as a fundamental right, then those people you think don't deserve the investment because the company doesn't want to lose money. So that's where we are now. We have a company that was created to get access to the funds that were appropriated to rebuild the electric system in Puerto Rico, but the company Luma Energy hasn't been able to comply with their obligations with the people of Puerto Rico, with their responsibilities under the contract. Right now, they have a supplementary contract. Thank you. And thank you for being here, everybody. We just finished, so you can turn it off. No.
Wasn't me, I swear.
So where was it? So
the alternative, like is there an alternative to Luma?
There's an alternative. When La Autoridad de Fuentes Fluviales was created originally, it was created with a governmental body. The administrator, the executives were people that were not politically driven, but were people that were experts in the field, administrating public assets. There were academics. There were members of the board that were in charge of the electric system in Puerto Rico. So for decades, we didn't have the problems that we had later on when the power authority became like a branch of the 2 political parties that had been in power in Puerto Rico. So I think we have to not to go back to the authority as it was a couple of years ago. We have to go way back to the concepts that built this electrical system in Puerto Rico in the hands of the people of Puerto Rico, but the governmental body that is in charge of the electric system, it can't be an extension of the political parties in charge, at least at the moment that has been in charge of the government of Puerto Rico. I mean, the politicization of the administration of the system, it was created the bankruptcy and the demise of the Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica. So there is an option. We could, I mean, the legislation of the governor could present legislation to allow to create a new body. I don't think that the government should renew the contract to Luma Energy. There will be a transition of compliance of Luma, giving back the assets of the transmission and distribution to the people of Puerto Rico, not in the hands of the government, but in the hands of a governmental body inside the corporation that is non-partisan, non-political, but experts by their merits, their experience, their knowledge, and their execution in the responsibilities of being in charge of electricity in Puerto Rico.
Right. So we're talking about a new public corporation that is depoliticized and responds to the people and not to the government. For those of you who want to know a little bit more about it, there is an organization that we collaborate in Puerto Rico on the ground that is called Cambio. It is headed by Ingrid Vila, and they work with Queremos Sol, We Want Sun. That is this proposal to push for 100 renewable energy with solar panels and storage in the roofs of houses in Puerto Rico. Yes, because I wanted to
briefly. Yeah, I know. Briefly, I want to add the following. First of all, I've heard the government say, well, those who criticize Luma's energy contract does not present an alternative,
right? And
they just want to go back to the power authority as it was a couple of years ago. That's not true. There has been a lot of organizations and a lot of experts that have said, lawyers, environmentalists, in the scientific field of energy, others that have said we can do something with it in the hands of the people of Puerto Rico about depolitization of the power authority. So there are options, and the idea of those options were already in place. So that's what's really mad, because it worked. It was functioning until the political parties that have been governing in Puerto Rico put their hands on the pocket of the authority, and then they use the budget as it was an ATM machine for the benefits of their parties. That's one. And the other one is, you mentioned renewable energy, which is something very important in Puerto Rico. Our geographic position allows us to have access to sun, to water, and also to wind, even though some parts of Puerto Rico doesn't work very efficiently, but sun and water, we do have to generate energy. And if the generation of power is in the hands of the private sector, of a private company, of course, their interest will not be to move forward to renewable energy because it's against their best economical interests. So Luma, and possibly if the power generation in Puerto Rico is privatized, they are gonna be enemies of the idea that Puerto Rico takes important steps towards renewable energy. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. We're gonna be talking about, because I think this is important, about solutions and also empowering the people here for things that you can do. So we're gonna go to that, but we are, I think, I might, like most people here might coincide, we are a colony. And we're gonna go to the topic of the colonial relationship. But before leaving that, because we're a colony, the US and here in Congress, there is a lot of say in what is happening with Luma. There is a lot of money. You mentioned $10 billion that are going to rebuilding the electric grid that are coming from federal funds. And in fact, they're giving all of that money. And we know for a fact that Congress said that we're going to give all of this money, but in part they say you have to privatize the electric system. So I just want to mention, because here we're in Washington, D.C., we have congressional staffers here and that they follow in social media or to Facebook or Zoom. And I want to ask you, what is the role that Congress and the Biden administration should play, in the rebuilding of the grid? There is a lot of money going right now to Puerto Rico. There is all of these projects from DOE, Department of Energy, the transition to renewables. So what should be the role of Congress and the Biden administration in this, topic of energy?
Well, I'll start by saying what they should not do. They will be tempted to federalize with an oversight board like the Financial Oversight Board in Puerto Rico, the use of those funds. What I think is that the funds that are being allocated to the rebuilding of the electric grid in Puerto Rico should be oversight, yes, by an independent body that their members should be from Puerto Rico and should have the knowledge, experience, and not be partisan. I mean, more or less like the idea I told you is an alternative to Luma Energy. And the Center for the New Economy in Puerto Rico made a proposal exactly in that direction, which is it's not that we don't have to make like an oversight body of how it's being managed, the $10 billion that were assigned to Puerto Rico, but it cannot be by federalizing the use of those funds. It should not be by more bureaucracy in the use of the funds. So I think that the step that we should take, or the people that are here that are in Washington, D.C., is to insist that we understand why policymakers in the United States do not trust the people that have been in charge in Puerto Rico, I mean, in the government. We understand that. We even have suffered by it. But that doesn't mean, and that doesn't give them the right to punish the people of Puerto Rico. And I think that the way that has been managed by the federal government, the idea of those funds not being, Puerto Rico decimos fiscalizados. I don't think fiscalize is a word.
Oversight.
But the idea of an oversight body that is the people in charge are people that are professionals. I mean, I'm thinking El Recinto Universitario de Mayagüez, which have great professors, academics, people that for years have been insisting of how we can rebuild the electric system in Puerto Rico. But the government has put them aside because their ideas are contrary to the interest of the private sector or the people that are receiving money by managing the rebuilding of the electric grid in Puerto Rico. So there are options and there are things that we should do, and there are things that we should insist that the government of the United States does not do in terms of the energy in Puerto Rico.
Okay, so it seems like we're talking that obviously the United States Congress has a big role in Puerto Rico. So let's move, and we can talk about La Junta maybe here. Let's move to the topic that I think is the most important, and I might, like most of you are here, the colonial relationship. Some people might not call it colonial relationship, they might call it the constitutional relationship or political relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States. But we are a US territory for those, right, of you that don't know. I think here, we have some Puerto Ricans, but we have also people from Latin America, but also we have people that are not from Puerto Rico or Latin America, Americans, as they call it here, I call them Uasians. Estadounidenses.
I have a professor in Harvard Law that I mean, he's from the US. He called them United Statesian, right? But it takes me so much effort to say it like that. I don't use it, but probably I will use yours.
Delicious. The thing is, for those of you who don't know, like in Spanish, especially when we say Americano, like we tend to refer to anyone that is from the Americas, either from, coming Canada, Mexico, all the way down to Argentina, right? Chile and Argentina. So that's why we try to like find a word. We have a word in Spanish that is estadounidense, and we try to like look for a word that is similar to that. But let's go to this, and this is where you can like take over here and talk about. I want to give like you can give a brief like historical context of the colonial relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S. Maybe go back just a little bit, just so there is some context. We're gonna talk about
Because the entrance door that it said that they close at 11 p.m. So we continue from.
we can continue later, but just a brief context, of like the most important things that we should know about this relationship, but most important answer at the end, like where are we today in that colonially speaking, in that relationship between Puerto Rico and the US? Are we worse than we were in other times, like at the beginning of the colonization, like last century, or are we better?
It's a long story. I'll try to make it short because I know there are people here that are not familiar with the United States-Puerto Rico relationship. It all started. When the US colonies became the nation of the United States and the United States became independent, they started the idea of moving toward the West. And the cornerstone of that idea was the Manifest Destiny, which is the following. It's a philosophical idea that white males, Protestants, and property owners had not only the right, but the God-given obligation to civilize what they consider uncivilized people. And with that philosophy, they started to move to the West. They exterminate the Native Americans. Some of them were in reservations, still are. Then they got to Mexico, the frontier with Mexico. So they took part of the territory of Mexico because they considered they were less of a people, less civilized people. And that frame of mind caused the US to take notice of the Caribbean. The idea that the Caribbean Sea is an American lake being a United States lake. So when the Monroe Doctrine was adopted, the idea that no European nation should be in this hemisphere controlling countries, Latin American people here know, the territories of Spain were in all Latin America, including Puerto Rico. The United States wanted to have a military outpost in Puerto Rico. They were interested in building a canal in what we know today is Panama. And they wanted to have like a military extended frontier from the continental US, so they could use military power to protect their interests from European invasion or European aggression in the hemisphere. So the Hispanic American War happened, that splendid little war allowed the United States to take control over Cuba, even though they recognized Cuba's independence. They approved what is called the Platt Amendment. Platt Amendment gave the US government the authority that if, even though Cuba were independent, if something in Cuba were to cause damage to their economic or military interests, the United States had the authority to intervene militarily in Cuba. In Puerto Rico, with the Treaty of Parties, we were ceded, Spain ceded Puerto Rico to the United States. So the United States got control over Puerto Rico. And in 1898, that control became a military government for 2 years. For a government, for a people that didn't actually presented resistance of the invasion, not because there weren't focus of resistance, but the independence movement was in exile because of the Spanish persecution, and a lot of them were working with the Cubans for the independence of Cuba because they thought once Cuba is independent, then Puerto Rico will be independent. 2 years of military government. In 1900, Foraker Act, which Congress legislated to have the first civil government. Then Jones Act, 1917. Jones Act made some changes in the civil government in Puerto Rico, but also imposed US citizenship on Puerto Ricans. And I use the word impose intentionally, because the only political body representative of Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico was la Cámara de Delegados, which is what you know here is House of Representatives. And they approved legislation opposing the imposition of the US citizenship over Puerto Ricans because they thought it was like marking Puerto Ricans to be colonial till the end of times. So, yada, 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 1948, la ley de gobernador electivo, Elective Governor Act. It took the US government 50 years, half a century, to allow Puerto Ricans to vote for their government, even within the limitations of the colonial regime, half a century. So that's why I start with the idea of the manifest destiny, because they always treated us as uncivilized. Then Public Law 600 allowed Puerto Ricans to draft a constitution, but that constitution had to be approved by Congress. And Congress approved that constitution with unilateral changes. For example, Section 20, which recognized the right to labor, I mean, to workers, to work, the right to work. It was in the original draft of the Constitution. Congress thought that's too communist for our taste. They took it out.
1950s, right?
1952. In 1952, Puerto Ricans ratified the Constitution, and there was a narrative that was created in Puerto Rico that with the approval of the Estado Libre Asociado Constitution, we had a new form of government, an autonomous government, based on a mutual or in the nature of a compact with a bilateral relationship as equals, fully democratic. Decades passed, and then I think I can say that the most critical part of our history is with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, because Puerto Rico wasn't anymore, I mean, it wasn't a military outpost of strategic importance in the Caribbean. The enemy, which was the Soviet Union, disintegrated. And from then on, the United States started to act and say what the independentistas for years have been saying. In the 90s, the United States Congress said, you know what, Section 936 is something that gives Puerto Rico more benefits than the states to have US companies with some kind of tax haven treatment. So they eliminated 936 section. They did. Then, after the struggle in Vieques, which was a military base of the US Navy, they used it as a target practice place, and it was really close to Roosevelt Roads, which was an important, I think it was the biggest naval facility of the United States outside continental territory. When the Vieques struggles happened, civil disobedience, and then the US government determined that they were gonna close the firing range in Vieques, they were gonna leave Vieques, and they were gonna leave Roosevelt Roads. And after that became what we know, the Presidential Task Force. I'm gonna take a couple of minutes here. I'm gonna abuse of your generosity.
It's okay. We're in the 90s now, right?
No, in the
late 90s.
2005, so we're there. 2005, the task force, which was proposed by Rubén Berríos Martínez, president of the Puerto Rican Independence Party, after he was arrested because of the civil disobedience in Vieques, he got a meeting with the other presidents of parties in Puerto Rico, with Bill Clinton, which was president of the United States at the moment. They created the Presidential Task Force. The first report was in 2005. President was George W. Bush. And I'm just gonna quote something it's very short, but for those who, when I heard Elliott say that maybe there are some people here that believe that Puerto Rico is not a colony, it's a territory. Well, 12, it's a dozen, doesn't matter how you say it. Yeah. So in page 6 of the report, then it says, it reads, the federal government may relinquish United States sovereignty by granting independence or ceding the territory to another nation. In 2005, an official presidential report says that they think that they have the authority to give us away to another nation without even considering what the Puerto Ricans think or say.
We saw that with Donald Trump, right?
No, with Donald Trump, we saw this with the asteroids. I mean,
There was a report that was later confirmed that Trump asked his closest advisors how he could give Puerto Rico to Greenland, that it will be Denmark.
yeah. And I think that the Danish are smarter than that, but yes, Donald Trump, what he said, how he said it, caused a lot of, anger in Puerto Rico, but he wasn't saying something different than what we have heard and see in all of our history. But in a big part of our history, that reality was just, how can you say, swept under the rug. But now, the United States started, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, started to say and act as the independentistas always said, we were, that is a colony of the United States, plain and simple. Constitutionally, with the insular cases, which were resolved in the 1900s to the 1905, I think. There is a case that was solved by the US Supreme Court, because it is called the insular cases because that's those are the cases that the US Supreme Court determined the constitutional position of the new territories acquired by the Hispanic American War. Philippines, Puerto Rico, and other territories. And the question was, what are we gonna do? I mean, we as a US government, what are we going to do with these new territories whose inhabitants are not Americans, and we don't intend to incorporate them as a state? Because previously, every territory that the US acquired, the idea was to incorporate it as a state. So they created the idea that there were territories, incorporated territories, that were intended to be or to become a state, and they are unincorporated territories that are not meant to become a state, and the flag does not follow, is not being followed by the Constitution. And I explain this because that was in the early 1900s. A couple of months ago, I mean, actually like 4 years ago, but a couple of months ago was, there was an expression by the US Supreme Court. They validated the insular cases. They reiterated that Puerto Rico is an unincorporated territory subjected to the plenary powers of Congress under the territorial clause of the US Constitution. When they solved what is known as the Sanchez Valle case, that same day, across the street, Congress approved Promesa.
2016. We're getting there.
We're getting there. So the same day that the US Supreme Court reiterated the insular cases and the idea that Puerto Rico is not part of but belongs to the United States, and that is a quote of Downs Bidwell, one of the cases. Congress, I mean, the US Supreme Court said it, Congress acted on it. So it's not only something that they said or they think, no, they acted on it, and they created Promesa. Promesa, which, as you know, created a new form of government in Puerto Rico. People call it La Junta. I think that's sugarcoating. It is a new form of colonial government. 7 people that are not elected by the people of Puerto Rico have the authority of what the budget of the country is going to be, how is it going to be used, and what the governor or the legislature can do under the circumstances of their fiscal plan.
And just to like add there, because I think like many times here in Washington, DC, I think like Republicans are seen as like very bad with Puerto Ricans, but Promesa was a bipartisan deal. It was pushed, and really the architects were under the Obama administration. Antonio Weiss, that was in the Treasury of Obama administration. So on these topics, and I think it's very important to say, when it comes to international relations, upholding colonialism and imperialism, I think, and this is personally me, I don't know like what one thinks or the other people, we're gonna have time for you all to talk about. Democrats and Republicans are always there on the same page in this topic. So are we worse than what we were when we were first colonized by the US?
There's no way of being good when you are a colony of another country. I mean, the limitations and the undemocratic, by definition, the undemocratic system that we have, it's always been bad. The difference is that before the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was in the best interest of the United States to create a fiction, mythology, and a bubble, an economic bubble in Puerto Rico, so they could save space. It's not a colony, it's a Estado Libre Asociado. They make their own determinations, they have their own government. When the Cold War ended, they just told the truth and they acted on it. So It's not that we are better, but yes, if you, I mean, not you, but if people think that under the Cold War, the interest of the United States was to save face in the international plane and keep a military outpost in Puerto Rico and have a stability in what by the definition is unstable, which is a colony, then yes, people could think we were better, but we are way worse, way worse. And I want to say something because I think it's important. Sometimes the system is designed, and this is part of the narrative that from the 50s was created in Puerto Rico. The most important thing is to solve the immediate problems of Puerto Rico. And then when we solve all of them, then we can talk about status. Like if they were not intertwined or
It's not the root problem. Let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about solutions now.
I just wanna,
Okay.
because I know you trust me. But I want to use a citation of an article from Foreign Affairs, America's Forgotten Colony. It was an article published in 2019 by Antonio Weiss and Brad Setzer. Antonio Weiss is one of the architects of Promesa. He worked on the Obama administration in Treasury Department. So he said this: the road ahead, the immediate economic crisis must be addressed through an ambitious program to restructure Puerto Rico's debt, rebuild its infrastructure, and revitalize its economy. But the path forward will be sustainable only if the island's political status is finally resolved.
He felt that.
Yeah, I know. It must be Catholic. I mean, it's constriction. But I use his quotation not because it hasn't been said before. It has in Puerto Rico and by the independence movement historically. But I use the word of a person that was very involved in the process of approving Promesa and moving forward to have the Fiscal Oversight Board. And he recognized in the process that there is no way that Puerto Rico can deal with the economic crisis if we don't deal. And this is not written in El Nuevo Día. This is in Foreign Affairs. This is for the think tanks in Washington, D.C. This is for the policymakers in Washington, D.C. You have to deal with the status question in Puerto Rico, and you have to deal with it now.
We hope that some of the people, especially the staffers from the Natural Resources Committee, that is the one that has jurisdiction over the Puerto Rico status, are hearing this, or we will send the recording to them. We have their emails, so they can hear this. I hope so to deal with that. Let's talk about solutions. I hear a lot here in Washington and United States. You know, you have talked about all of these colonial contexts, and especially after Maria and with the response of the Trump administration, right? I heard so much here, especially from people that are non-Puerto Ricans, saying, okay, then what is the solution? They're suffering, they're second-class citizens, they cannot vote for the president, they don't have Congress representation. So the solution is, and I hear this a lot, equality. I hear this word a lot, equality. Now they're changing to say equity, you know, to kind of like have two words. And when they talk about equality, they're basically talking about statehood. I hear this a lot, especially from people that are Democrats. I hear, let's make them a state, right? That's going to help them. Is that the right approach or not? And what is the proposal of the Puerto Rico Independence Party?
But it's not the right approach. And I'm going to say this with the with all the respect, I mean, but it has to be said. One of the problems that progressive liberal Democrats have with the issue of Puerto Rico is this question. Puerto Rico is a different nation with a different history, with a different culture, with a different language. We are a people. We are not a minority within the United States. And some of them think that because we are US citizens, we are a minority within the United States. We are not. We are US citizens by virtue of law, not because we are United Statesian, Americans, whatever you want to call it. We are Puerto Ricans. Actually, I think most of you are from Puerto Rico. Does anybody refer to you as Puerto Rican Americans?
No.
Never heard that.
Never? But you have heard of Italian Americans. You have heard of
Mexican.
African American.
Mexican.
You have heard
Americans.
Irish American, Polish Americans.
Everybody's an American.
You know the difference? We are not a minority. We are a people, and because of our political history and our historic relationship with the United States, happens that we have been a colony of the United States for 124 years, and we are US citizens. That's their problem. They make the decision. They made the decision to make us US citizens by virtue of law, because it was in their best interest. If tomorrow Congress approved legislation and basically eliminates Jones Act and naturalization laws that apply to Puerto Ricans, the people that are born from tomorrow on, are not going to be US citizens. And it doesn't have to be because we made the decisions. They can legislate and do it right now. Okay? So we are clear. Do you ask me?
What is the proposal?
The proposal. I get excited. That's why I
That's why you come here.
yeah,
You know.
that's why I did this here. Our proposal is this. Of course, the United States has the moral, legal, and political obligation to decolonize Puerto Rico. What the Puerto Rican Independence Party has proposed is an status assembly that Puerto Ricans elect delegates democratically, representing each of the options that are non-territorial, non-colonial options, either sovereign free state, statehood, or independence, and that status assembly confronts Congress as representatives of the people of Puerto Rico. So Congress is forced to reply which of the options, first of all, are viable. For a long time, Congress has resisted to say statehood is not a viable option. And I know probably here are people that believe in good faith that statehood is an option. And I can understand that. I don't believe in statehood, but I can understand that. But I think that the people that believe in statehood deserve that Congress reply if they are willing to make a different nation, a different culture, a different people, a state of the United States with more political power than 27 states, but becoming the poorest state of the nation. That's a question that has to be addressed, has to be answered. Lucky for us, today, one congressman in the hearing that Elliott was making reference to, some of you are smiling because you saw it on the internet or in Twitter, told the governor to his face, oye, no dio oye.
Go to the page of our organization but Puerto Rico, and there, it is Congressman Hayes from Georgia, Republican. Today, questioned Governor Pierluisi, the governor of Puerto Rico was here in Washington, D.C. He's still here. And he said to Pierluisi, wait, I had another tweet here. Okay.
Always come here either asking for more money or asking for statehood. As you know, I don't believe in statehood. And I don't think Puerto Rico should become a state. So don't mention that or something like that.
Right. Not only that, he also say, and I'm not alone here. He refers Congress in opposing a statehood for Puerto Rico. We're not even close to have a conversation about statehood.
And that takes me back to your question initially, because when I talked about the liberal progressive or Democrats in the United States, some may think, he said it because he's Republican. Those
Racist.
ugly Republicans, racist. No. They say what other things, but they don't want to say it. Because when Democrats have been in power, Puerto Rico haven't been better, and they haven't pushed for a decolonization process. Actually, Biden, when he started this administration, he said that he was going to address the issue of the status of Puerto Rico and to promote a self-determination process. And the second week, I think he was in the White House, he said, well, that's a complex problem. Congress should address it first. So thank you very much. Have a nice day. I think the White House at the moment, I hope that changes, but they haven't been involved in the issue of status of Puerto Rico.
They don't want to.
They don't want to. But when I say liberals, progressives, and Democrats, is the mistake that they make is that they think that the problem of Puerto Rico is a civil rights problem. It is not. It is a human rights problem. The people of Puerto Rico as a people has a right to self-determination and independence. It's recognized on the UN Charter, in the Bill of Human Rights. The United States as a government is signatory. Is that a word?
Signatory.
Oh, I get there. It's been a long time. And in the Covenant of Political and Civil Rights, which the United States is also a signatory of that treaty, there is a right to recognize the people's self-determination and independence. So I think dealing with the issue of Puerto Rico as a civil rights issue, because we are US citizens, I'm going to be very respectful because I respect the civil liberties movement in the United States. And I understand why Rosa Parks was a symbol when she insisted on sitting in front of the bus. I mean, the front part of the bus, not in front of the bus, front part. I don't want to get lost in translation, but that's not our fight. I understand why African Americans were fighting for the civil rights within the United States, with the complicity of the history of the African Americans in the United States, and the horrors of the African Americans, the history of the United States. But we don't want to sit in the front part of the bus. As a people, we have a right, and we aspire to drive our own bus. We're not going to crash your bus, I mean, the US bus. Actually, we can travel together, but each one in their own bus. That's something I want to clarify, because I know there are a lot of people here that they're interested in politics or have friends in politics. And when you explain to them the difference between being a people, being a nation, having our own history, our own identity, our own culture, our own language, that's not the same that you may think, well, Puerto Ricans live in the United States and they are a minority in the United States. Well, they are a minority within the United States in terms of where they are living, but as a people, we are Puerto Ricans, and our right to self-determination, decolonization, and independence is a right recognized as a human right in the international plane. One thing is that Puerto Ricans, most of you, when you go to your apartment and you have you have a friend that is from Puerto Rico, you're gonna speak Spanish and you're gonna eat rice, beans, and bistec. Doesn't taste the same, but it's worth trying. But when you are out of your apartment, you wanna be successful in the United States, you have to become part of the main current of what it is being a United States citizen, which is not, it's different for what we are as a people Puerto Ricans. So I just wanted to clarify that because I know you asked about it because there is this notion, and it probably is a correct one, but that's something that I'm not here to judge. Yes, when you see Republicans' policies and expressions, it's like an iron fist that punch you in the face. But with Democrats, the difference is that that iron fist is covered by a velvet glove. So it looks pretty, but it is a punch, and it is iron fist.
There is a lot of hypocrisy.
At least from the point of view of the case of Puerto Rico.
Okay, we're gonna do two more questions, one, and then we're gonna go, and we'll still have half an hour, you know, we want to have the discussion.
I'm not leaving. Right?
No,
I'm not gonna run out.
No, but we're gonna go to the two very, important questions. And let's make the context here because we have talked a lot about the colonial relationship. But let's talk about the decolonization efforts or self-determination efforts. And for those of you who don't know, for the last 2 years here in Congress, at least something positive, I can say, there has been a lot of conversation about the political status of Puerto Rico. There have been several bills that want to deal with the political status of Puerto Rico. There was the Puerto Rico Self-Determination Act that was presented by Nidia Velázquez and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Our organization has been pushing for that bill. There was the statehood admission bill that was presented by Puerto Rico Resident Commissioner Jennifer Gonzalez and a Democrat, Darren Soto. And that came to be in this summer, what it was called the consensus bill, or HR 8393. That is, something very present right now, because right now we're seeing if Democrats are gonna take that bill to vote in the next couple of weeks as a symbolic vote. And I want to go here, for you to talk about these decolonization efforts and if they are really being effective or if that is the way to go, these bills. But I want you to attend also because we're talking about this today. If you're seeing El Nuevo Dia is the leading newspaper in Puerto Rico. They did an interview to Juan Dalmau and Jose Delgado, that is a good friend, and he's watching most probably. He came with a headline that kind of implied that you were, and the Puerto Rico Independence Party was kind of supporting this consensus bill, HR 8393. So I want you to clarify that and to talk about if this is the right approach of Congress or what should be the approach that Congress should have for a democratic, inclusive self-determination process.
We supported the initiative of Nidia Velázquez, the original one, because it was within the framework of what the Puerto Rican Independence Party and the program that I pushed forward, which was Patria Nueva in the last election, which is the idea of a status assembly between options that are non-colonial, non-territorial options for Puerto Rico. And it also has had something important. It created a bilateral committee with delegates of that convention, but also with members of the US government and US Congress to start to talk about viability, responsibilities, consequences, obligations, and transition of each of the options. So it was something that helped to make Congress assume a position of each of the options. As you said, I don't want to repeat everything you said. There was a consensus bill, and it wasn't a perfect bill. And when members of the Committee of Natural Resources visited Puerto Rico, they had a meeting with me and the leaders of the Puerto Rican Independence Party, and I told them, if that bill keeps the language that statehood is self-executing, that bill is not gonna go forward. It's not gonna be approved, because Congress is not gonna approve legislation that basically tied their hands with one of the options, which is the option that actually they haven't been able to talk about viability of it, or the conditions, if they were to consider statehood, the conditions for Puerto Ricans to become, or Puerto Rico to become a state. But we thought, the Puerto Rican Independence Party, that if the bill was approved without that language, Senate was not going to approve, because even pro-statehood allies like Michael Rubio and Senator Rick Scott had said that there's no possibility of a bill about the status of Puerto Rico in the Senate if it has the statehood option in it. Those are the statehooders' allies. So options on hand. What I told Jose is that in the next 35 days, it's been too long, so if in the next 35 days, the Democratic House of Representatives still, if they approve the legislation of consensus, even with the language that I don't agree with, and it's not a perfect bill, it's not the bill that I would drafted, but at least the issue is still on the table, still is debated, and it would be or could be, even in its symbolism, if it is approved, Senate is not going to approve it, but in its symbolism, at least is an immediate reference that the options that Puerto Ricans have on the table cannot be colonial or territorial. That's a step forward. Small step, but a step forward. It would be the first bill that Congress approved that actually does not have the colonial status as an option to decolonize Puerto Rico. So, and that's what I said.
Okay.
But I think that we need in Puerto Rico to push Congress to act.
Mhm.
And that's why I insist that every initiative has to come from Puerto Rico. And I think that the status convention or assembly is a procedural mechanism to do it. But I always see not always, but I see as a good sign if the subject still being discussed, if it's on the table. I'm not going to use myself as an example, but this morning, my son Gabriel and my daughter Sofia, they woke up. Puerto Rico was a colony. And tonight, they are going to go to sleep, and Puerto Rico is still a colony. And everything that happens between when they woke up and they went to sleep, I hope is the discussion that it will come the day that they don't have to wake up in the colony and go to sleep in the colony. So that's why I see with good eyes that if Congress and the House of Representatives approves that legislation, I think that there are people in the House of Representatives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others that resisted to support the bill as it was drafted, but more I think was that it didn't give the opportunity of formal hearings, and that the people of Puerto Rico could have participated even more. There were meetings in Puerto Rico, official meetings, but they were not recorded. There is no public record of it. And that was the meeting I was participating that I told you about. But I think that now with the new House of Representatives in control of Republicans, some people that didn't support that initiative could think that now leaving at least that bill of Puerto Rican self-determination for the new Congress, the Republican Congress, at least it's like it's for the politics here in the United States, it's something to say, you see that the Republicans do not approve Puerto Rican self-determination, and thus they don't support Hispanics in the United States. So I think that the equation could be more like for the benefit of the elections here and the Hispanic votes here in the United States that are really good faith on the self-determination process. But if that's the way that the issue of Puerto Rico is kept in discussion, it's kept being considered, well, we have to see what it comes to, but I think it's positive. I mean,
a lot to discuss there, but let's go to the last question and then we'll go to the Q&A. 2022 is almost over, 2023 is coming next year, 2024 general elections.
King of the North is coming.
Governor Juan Dalmau, is that a possibility coming November 2024? And if you are governor, is independence gonna arrive the next day that you are, coming to the governorship? Can you talk about that? What is the prospect? I know people here, and for the ones who doesn't know, the Puerto Rican Independence Party, for many decades, they got like 2% of support in the electoral politics in Puerto Rico. One in 2020 broke with that historically, I think since 1952. The Puerto Rican Independence Party didn't have such a good, like the percentage of voting that he had. And I have to say, when you see, for example, how much money the Puerto Rican Independence Party is getting, is the top party right now. If you see El Nuevo Dia took out this article, it is the party with most money right now in Puerto Rico, kind of like giving an idea, when we add the percentage that this other new party in Puerto Rico that form Movimientos Victoria Ciudadana, Citizens Victory Movement, there is talk about a political alliance and you leading that political alliance and maybe becoming governor. Can you talk about that prospect and about the prospect of independence for Puerto Rico when you're governor?
You talk about the finances of a Puerto Rican Independence Party, which is true, but we don't receive money from the allies of Luma Energy. Just to clarify, as you're explaining, there has been a change. I hopeful it's going to change politics in Puerto Rico forever. That has something to do, I think, with the result. I think that past election was a consequence of things that were brewing for a long time. But the last 4 years before the election, take into consideration this. Puerto Rico started the 2017 with a financial oversight board that were exercising their authority with austerity measures, closing schools, closing services of government, affecting labor wages, retirees, they cut off their benefits. So people started to feel what the board was doing in exercising their authority, because the board existed previously, but in 2017, they started to exercise their powers over the government of Puerto Rico. Then came Irma. People forget about Irma. Irma is the long lost sister of Maria. She came previously to Maria. But some municipalities suffered a lot because of Irma. So when people talk about Maria, they forget that there were people without power, energy, a couple of weeks before Maria. And they have suffered their properties, houses before Maria. Then came Maria. Maria just devastated everything. And after Maria, there was an anemic response to the suffering of the people of Puerto Rico, an anemic response from the federal government. You remember the visit of Donald Trump throwing paper towels to the people of Puerto Rico in a photo opportunity, and also an anemic response from the government of Puerto Rico, which treated Maria as if it was just a tropical storm. And I'm gonna take a minute. I'm gonna tell you a personal story. After Maria, like a week after Maria, a week and a half after Maria, I decided as a Secretary General of the Puerto Rican Independence Party. Remember, there were no communications with anybody. There were no telephone communication, nothing, no internet. So I decided to go to different municipalities, look for the leadership of the Puerto Rican Independence Party. I couldn't communicate, so I had to go to the public places, friends' houses, family, and find them, and first of all, see if they were okay, but also to ask them to collaborate with the effort of rebuilding Puerto Rico and the recovery effort in the municipality. We have a municipal legislature. We have our electoral structure. We wanted everybody working with the people in different communities. I spent like 2 weeks doing that whole island. And then what happened? The leaders of the Popular Democratic Party and of the New Progressive Party, starting in radio, starting saying, well, after all that has happened, where is the PIP? Where is the PIP? Where is Juan Dalmau? Where is Juan Dalmau? And I told myself, well, I'm doing what I think I can do and I should do. But, well, I said, well, I'm gonna do some interviews for some radio stations to explain what we are doing. We want within our limitations with the recovery effort, so people are not be misguided by those political attacks in a moment that I don't think it was proper. But so they told me, well, the interview is gonna be at the Pedro Rosselló Convention Center in San Juan, because that's where the emergency committee is convening and the media is there. So there are all the radio stations. They are doing interviews there. So I went there. There was a lot of police, a lot of security around it. By then, mind you, I was a senator. I had to identify myself to get in the building. When I went into the building, there was air conditioning. Something that I thought I would never feel again after Maria. And it was strange. Then I saw, this is not an ad, but this is not publicity, but then I saw a Starbucks booth on my left working. as normal. People were in line, waiting for the coffee, for the muffins. What people were waiting for the muffins and the coffee? Public officials. Jefes de agencia. Vestidos de traje. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Then I saw a buffet layout. You could eat whenever you wanted. You can serve yourself food whenever you wanted, warm food. And then I don't know if you have seen the movie Titanic. I saw a person pushing a pastry cart around the convention center. If you wanted some pastries, or if you wanted some cake. I thought at that moment, at that time, there is no way that the people that are in charge of the recovery of Puerto Rico know what happened. There's no way. If you are doing this, you don't know what people are living out there. For 2 weeks, when I went around the island, the emotional distress that I brought home after seeing places that it looked like a bomb has exploded. I remember when I drove from Yabucoa to Maunabo, I saw houses stuck in the mud of the mountains, like something squashed the house against the mountain. There was nothing there. If it was a home or a house, it wasn't anymore. So that family didn't have where to live, where to sleep. And the people that were in charge were just absolutely in another planet. And then that was confirmed when the chat was made public. And the people that were in charge were making jokes about the people that were dead. One of them said, well, if the families are angry because Ciencias Forenses is late in retrieving the cadavers and return the bodies of the loved ones to their family, well, then we should take the cadavers, the people that died in Maria, and put it in the streets, because the crows have rights also and they need to eat. Those were the people that were in charge. So I tell you this story because after the chat, just before the chat, Julia Kelleher was arrested for corruption. The champion of closing schools in Puerto Rico. Then the chat, then something, then, Jennifer Gonzalez is not the only champion. Jennifer Gonzalez is the champion of La Ley de Cabotaje. That's another story. But then, summer of 2019, Ricky renuncia. A new generation rose to the occasion and said, enough is enough. And they went to the streets, but they don't only did it, they inspired other generations that were affected by conformity. They were affected by the idea that there was no other way out. So that new generation not only took the streets with Ricky Renuncia, they inspired other generations to do it. And after that, well, Pedro Pierluisi was governor for 24 hours, then Juan Dalmau, and I tell you this because there is a context to what happened in 2020. Sometimes I talk to young people from that new generation, and they feel that that wasn't enough. That after all we did in the summer of 2019, well, but you see, after that, Pedro Pierluisi, Wanda Vázquez, and now Pedro Pierluisi. And I think that probably because I'm a little bit older, just a little bit, I think you miss a point. Changes, and particularly for our people like Puerto Rican people and what we have to suffer. Changes does not happen in one day. It is a transitional process. But I'm sure, y ahora voy a hablar en español. Lo que pasó en el verano del 19 fue un parte de agua. Y eso no se lo quita a nadie. Y gracias a eso se transformó la actitud del país al resultado del 2020. Y eso fue un resultado histórico nunca antes visto en tiempos modernos. Que un partido independentista sacara un 14%. En la historia política de Puerto Rico, desde los tiempos del primer marullo, cuando el primer español se bajó a conquistar la isla, desde ese momento no ha habido un partido político existente que haya crecido de una elección a otra 7 veces. Mucho menos un partido político que tenga independentista en su nombre, en un país que lo han aterrorizado con la idea de su independencia y que naturalmente, como ustedes saben, que si yo gano las elecciones, al día siguiente van a enrollar las carreteras, vamos a cortar caña, va a ser con un machete bot, usaremos pantalones de saco amarrados con soga, Fidel Castro va a llegar por agua, Hugo Chávez por Luquillo, claro, se han enterado que fallecieron ambos, pero porque la guerra fría, es un país que se le ha aterrorizado de esa manera. Y que un movimiento nuevo, Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana, obtuviera un 14%. La suma de ambos es un 28% de los votos. El gobernador certificado por la Comisión Estatal de Elecciones fue certificado con 33% de los votos.
So there is a chance. Hay un chance.
So there is a chance.
Tenemos que ir a las preguntas.
I know.
Porque si no, votan desde aquí.
Y estaba cogiendo fuerza, me viste. No, but you're right. There is a chance. And there has been, there's been a dialogue between Manuel and myself. How can we make possible alliances, political alliances, and see how that can be something, let me be careful, that would open a door for an electoral alliance. The electoral law in Puerto Rico prohibits electoral alliances of a candidate for 2 political parties. That's something that existed in Puerto Rico until 2011. I mean, 2 political parties could nominate 1 candidate for the 2 parties, and at some point in our history, la alianza, la coalición, but in 2011, it was prohibited, and it was prohibited because I think they saw that it was something that they will have to deal with soon enough, and actually they are. So there's a chance, there is dialogue, there is openness, and that hasn't happened before in Puerto Rico, and that's something also as a consequence of what happened in the summer of 2019. So don't ever think that it wasn't enough, and don't ever think that there was no consequence after it. The process may not be as fast as you wish, but the process is going on and is directly a consequence of what you guys did as a new generation. Así que nadie le quita lo bailo.
Thank you, Juan. Okay, so let's go to the questions. Who? There's questions. Okay, Manuel, because I know you. Has to be brief, so we can like.
As I can.
Okay.
And I said this is a great stuff in here, and this is the place to have this discussion because we have young people, the intellectuals, they are intellectuals, and this is what we need to talk. And I think it should go on and have another discussion with a roundtable, and I'd be willing to participate because I have done a lot of work in Congress.
We'll get Manuel Natal, right?
Yeah.
To come here next time and have, right?
Well,
You can sit down with Manuel and have, the conversation like.
Well,
I can have a
I would
conversation.
like to be able too, because I have done a lot of work, especially in the area of citizenship. And I want to say that I'm amazed with Juan Dalmau, the way he speaks English, being from Puerto Rico, living in Puerto Rico all his life, I think. And he speaks English, and he even, some words sounded like with a New England accent there, so that's great.
From Condado Moderno en Cabo.
Right, now, Juan Dalmau mentioned something very important that is a great concern for the Puerto Rican people, and that is citizenship. I am an immigration lawyer. I've done a lot of work also in Congress, lobbying, also on issues of Puerto Rico. And I think if there ever is a bill in Congress to revoke in any manner or limit in any manner the ability of the Puerto Rican people to exercise their right of their citizenship based on the 14th Amendment, I will be the first one to bring legal action in court. And I guarantee that we win, because our citizenship is the same citizenship that a person born in the District of Columbia acquired their citizenship, because the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico are from the same law that grant their citizenship to the people born in the District of Columbia. And anybody can go and research that. They can find it at 8 USC 11018. Look at 36, 37, and 38. All right, and you will find it there. Now, and I
It's like a good class.
and I want
Immigration law.
I will talk later with Juan Dalmau, because I want you to put me in contact with Julian Alvarez Gonzalez. He wrote a law review article that the Puerto Rican Independence Party back in the
1989 to 1992.
right, presented defending the citizenship of Puerto Ricans after independence, and why that is important, because they have used the issue of the citizenship to intimidate people that if they go for independence, they will lose their citizenship. However, that is a decision that a person, that's a choice that a person makes. They will lose their citizenship if they voluntarily relinquish, and it's a process for that. It's an immigration process. Now, and I said this because I represented a movement in Puerto Rico in the 90s that wanted to renounce a citizenship and remain only Puerto Rican citizens. And I even took the case to the US Supreme Court. We lost, and the reason we lost, the guy couldn't relinquish his citizenship, and the DC Court of Appeals stated very clearly that Puerto Rico is part of the same law that District of Columbia citizens acquired that. Now, this is a very important.
But we have to wrap it up.
Yeah, I will wrap it up, but that's why I want the round table, because there were 18 bills presented in Congress between the invasion to 1952 that was for granting independence to Puerto Rico. And on each of those bills, there was a process to preserve that citizenship if people wanted it. But when they created the citizenship based on the 14th Amendment, they don't have to even talk about that, because people, and I don't say that because I'm statehood. I'm saying that because I'm Puerto Rican, and people are being intimidated with the fact that they will lose a citizenship. Now, I can tell you this: one, they learned after independence that they don't need citizenship because there are other benefits about not being a citizen. They're not going to be 3.4 million Puerto Ricans living in Puerto Rico as a US citizen.
Thank you, Manuel. And this for Juan, do you have like a very quick
Wait, you don't
Comment?
have to answer that.
No, I know it's a comment, but for the younger generation, there was a bill. It is known as a Johnston bill. You can Google it. It was the Senate Bill 712, 712. That bill was the first serious consideration of the status of Puerto Rico after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it has an explanation of how independence would work in a transition process, what would happen to citizenship, acquired rights. So if you want to Google it, just Google it, because there has been history before, as Manuel said.
And thank you, Manuel, for that. And we'll take that recommendation of
Yeah.
doing a
Right.
round table, and that's something that maybe the GW students, can think about. So, okay, there.
Licenciado, thank you very much for the availability. I just want to say, I really like how you were careful with saying the MCV stuff. Mañana en primera plana en Puerto Rico va a decir en el Nuevo Día, Juan Dalmau confirma que van a estar unidos con el MCV, eso sería muy bueno. Aside from that, 124 years of US colonialism, I don't know how many referendums, because I lost count, insular cases that reiterate that only Congress has complete control of the territorial status. Part of your answer to the solution was, I will designate delegates to go vouch and to go put this in front of Congress. But is that enough? How can we force a 535 congressmen to actually make a decision? How can we force the Republicans, who don't really care or don't seem to care a lot about us, and a lot of Democrats too, by the way, how can we force them to make a decision? After Maria, we were in the spotlight, in the international spotlight. And Puerto Rico was talked a lot about, and even then, it didn't really matter. What else can we do?
Ahora, what I believe as a procedural mechanism for the people of Puerto Rico to exercise their right to self-determination and to move forward or force Congress to act, part of it is the Status Assembly, and the people would elect the delegates as representative of each one of the options, non-colonial, non-territorial. But it's not, if I'm governor, it's not that I am going to appoint them. But I do know why you ask this question. It's because, is that enough? I think it is important, but it needs much more done. For example, this is an example. I could think, if there is a governor that takes seriously the right of the people of Puerto Rico to its self-determination, to make a march here in the United States, here in Congress, of people of Puerto Rico from not only the United States, those who are living here, but those from Puerto Rico, something that really turn up the heat of the discussion. What are doing the Puerto Ricans here? There are thousands and thousands of Puerto Ricans here, and there are people that believe in the independence, and there are people that believe in free association, there are people that believe in statehood. We are demanding Congress to talk, to speak, to act. So that's part of it. What I also see as if I were governor, and as a circuit of interviews with the national press in the United States, explaining the case of Puerto Rico. There are people that don't know where is Puerto Rico. There are people that think that people is Costa Rica. So I think if we had a governor that really takes seriously this matter as a democratic claim of the people of Puerto Rico and put it in the spotlight internationally, a governor that is that's able to go to different platforms, the UN or other international platforms, with the leadership of another options. And I can tell the people that I talk to, I can tell them, you know what? We do not agree what the final status of Puerto Rico should be. I believe in independence, but I believe that the people of Puerto Rico have the right to select as a people the status option of their preference, and Congress is denying that right, and we need the support of the international community, but you need a governor to engage in the process. What we cannot do is think, you are a statehooder, I say this with all my respects, but you cannot believe that 6 people con una cartulina dibujada con crayola frente al Congreso. It's a serious claim for statehood for Puerto Rico, and it cost us $1 million a year. That's not the way. As you said, Jennifer Gonzalez wasn't able to get one vote of one Republican in the National Resources Committee, her committee. And if you see what the Popular Democratic Party governors have done, is that they believe that colonialism is a perpetual right. I mean, it's something that we should have forever. But if you have a governor to engage, you could have the status convention, but you can also have to engage the people of Puerto Rico, to march, to demand the international claim, to make the issue of Puerto Rico a democratic claim of a people that has been denied for more than a century. I think we can make Congress respond, and I hope that's what we're gonna do.
Thank you,
Thank
Juan.
you.
Well, I'm gonna ask you something that is difficult. I know that, to keep like the answer.
Very difficult.
I know, to like go over the questions that we have here and in the Zoom. Just to add to that quickly, we can work. We have been working here. We're on the ground in Washington, D.C., but also throughout the diaspora. We have a lot of like a network, big network of collaborators from many cities in the U.S. So look out our organization, BOTPR, Boricuas Unidos de la Diáspora. We are talking to people like Juan of like a couple of things, for the coming years around that. So, like I will say like we have to make that happen, Okay, questions here. Here. Okay, Maximino, then Gabriel. Here.
Saludos, Juan.
Saludos, Maximino.
Question.
Yeah.
What is the independence diaspora doing in the US to help decolonization of Puerto Rico?
Well, in the case of the Puerto Rican Independence Party, which is the one that I could talk about, we have Maximino, which is the president of the Puerto Rican Independence Party here in DC. We have a Puerto Rican Independence Party diaspora, which are people that live in different states that have organized in different places. First of all, what they are doing and what I think is important to do, I see a lot of young faces here. You have to register to vote in Puerto Rico. You are studying here, you have a right to vote, but if you don't register to vote, when you apply for the voto ausente, then you will not be granted the right to vote. You need to register. If you visit Puerto Rico in December, you're gonna see your family, you can go to the Electoral Commission, and that's right next to the Coliseum, Jose Miguel Agreló, Puerto Rico. It takes you less than 10 minutes, but it is important to do that. And that's something that we're working on. Secondly, to educate of what we have been talking here, and I know other groups are doing. We have to educate the American people of what is our struggle as a people for a democratic status, and to confront our problems in a much better way. And also, well, with the finances, we depend on contributions of people, that moderate contributions or important contributions, and the diaspora is helping on that effect also. That's 3 things that I could mention, and I know that other independence groups are doing their job. I don't want to talk
Right.
about what they are doing, and I know other groups that are non-partisan and non-political, where they are political but non-partisan, or they don't push for one determined ideology or status option, but they are doing their best. And of course, what you have done here today is prove that there are a lot of people doing a lot of things.
There are many groups, and just to be clear, we're non-partisan organization. Obviously, it is ideological, but it is non-partisan, just to make clear. But there are many groups in the diaspora that are working on decolonization efforts. And we're trying to kind of like, connect all of them, because we have to kind of like, what we say, like swing all together, because that's the only way that something like Congress that is so powerful is gonna really like make notice of. Next question, there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Licenciado, for being here to talk to us, and for the organizers as well. It's an honor to witness you speak. I just wanted to ask you about how people perceive not only Puerto Rican politics, but Puerto Rican culture. We've seen Bad Bunny become basically the biggest artist, like in the world, and we've seen a huge kind of focus on tourism and the unfortunate like tax evasions that come from that. How do you think that people's perception of Puerto Rico as like a culture and of those things that we create for them affects, the way that they see politics, or how they might want to take advantage of that to their own ends?
Well, a difficult question, because I think if you take the artistic part of our artists like Bad Bunny, Ricky Martin, and others, Cani Garcia, they have shown the world what the people of Puerto Rico is capable in terms of arts, culture, artistic expressions. If you, on the other hand, talk to some people, my experience, some people, not all of them, from Latin America, some of them tells me, well, but you are an American, you are a US citizen. And you have to explain to them, no, wait a minute. Los lagartijos y los electricistas trepan postes y no son la misma cosa. So there is a lot of work to do, even in Latin America. Internationally, there is more support now, because when the Cold War was on, to look for allies in the international plane, even though privately they would say, I support the independence of Puerto Rico and I support the right of self-determination of the people of Puerto Rico, but my country does not want to affect our relationships with the United States if we support officially the independence of Puerto Rico. After the Cold War, there was a change. And for example, the Decolonization Committee of the United Nations have approved for like last 10 years by unanimous consent, the resolution in favor of the self-determination and independence of Puerto Rico, with all of the countries there represented, and with no intervention of the Department of State of the United States. Previously, the Department of State and the ambassador of the US in the United Nations tried to intervene, not to get the resolution approved. So there has been a change in the international plane that matter. But it's difficult to answer the question, because there is not how people internationally see Puerto Rico. It depends. I know how policymakers in the United States see Puerto Rico, and they see us as we are, with our good things, our bad things. They know we are a nation. They know we are a different people. They know we are proud of what we are. They know that when someone shouts, yo soy boricua para que tú lo sepas, todo el mundo se sienta, ahí estoy yo. Es un grito de resistencia al mismo tiempo y de afirmación, por más pedestre que pueda sonar. And I think so. And I think also that they were collaborators with the colonial governments in Puerto Rico of the Popular Democratic Party and the New Progressive Party. And they, I'm going to say something really quickly, and they tolerated corruption because the Popular Democratic Party and New Progressive Party leaders were their allies. They are not anymore. So you can see after the 2000, the amount of people arrested or the people that are being accused for corrupt actions from the Popular Democratic Party and the New Progressive Party. It's not that corruption came to Puerto Rico yesterday, it's that they tolerated it. They are not willing to tolerate it anymore. And that's something that tells you the attitude of the US policymakers about the people that has governed Puerto Rico for the last 54 years.
Thank you. And I'm gonna just quickly add to that. Juan is not gonna mention it, but if the political alliance takes, form for 2024, Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana and Juan, and I'm gonna say it here, this is how I see it. How people say, Manuel Natal is gonna run for mayor of San Juan, and Juan is gonna run for the governorship, and they'll make, if they cannot get, to amend the electoral code, they'll do some kind, I think, this is me thinking, it's not that Juan told me. I think they'll make some kind of loophole, to make Juan the unilateral candidate of that alliance for governorship. And at that moment, I'm confident that Bad Bunny and many of the big Puerto Rican stars are going to endorse Juan for governorship and Manuel for mayor of San Juan, and hopefully they will win. That's my perspective. So hopefully you can get Bad Bunny's. Right?
Judge, I need to add something because I don't want my silence to be interpreted like, I know that's your position, but I want to tell you what I can tell you. Yes, Manuel Natal and I have had a few meetings and have an open dialogue. I think we respect each other very much, and we are aware of the responsibility and the historic moment that the people of Puerto Rico are living. And we are very, very concerned of what's going on in Puerto Rico, and what we can do about it is something very important for us. What can that lead us in the electoral plane is another thing. This is a process. It's not an easy one, not only because of the legal prohibitions of the electoral law in Puerto Rico, but also because we're talking about two different parties that need to talk about a lot of things, and there are different ways. I think Edil mentioned one, but there are different ways that process can take course, and I'll leave it to that, because one of my concerns is that this is something new, and it doesn't have precedent in modern politics in Puerto Rico. Modern politics, I mean, since La Alianza en los 30, 40 of the last century. So that process is very complex, particularly in the context of a colony of the United States, because people have a different notion, different opinions, different way of how things should end up for the Puerto Rican people. So, viste más despacio que voy deprisa.
Two more questions,
Okay.
and then we end. And we're gonna have a reception here with food, so we can continue the conversation, because they're gonna throw us out of the room, maybe?
Not yet.
Okay, but we'll continue the conversation outside. Okay. 3 more questions, that, and that. Okay.
Saludos, Edil and Juan. First of all, gracias por habilitar este foro para esta discusión tan importante. My question has to do with the topic of the 2020 elections and all the momentum around with young people on the island. Definitely it had to do a lot with the summer of 2019 and all those protests. But I wanted to know also We talked about this before the 2020 elections, about all the hype around the youth, if it was credible, if the results could really be there, and they were. So now with even a possible alliance of both of the independent candidates that got the most of that young vote, do you think that you could actually take this with how it is, with how it took part last time, with just people being active on social media with each other, people just sharing by word of mouth? Or are there being more steps taken on the island for effective political education and to get even more people out there, to get them registered, to get them in the know, just so that they know what they believe in? Because it's not always about just following the tide. Something that we were all advocating for back in the 2020 elections was to help people make the right vote with what's right with them and what's right for what they think for the island. So what steps are you taking on the island to push forward that conversation and that political education?
Well, first step is, I'm gonna tell your father that you made the most difficult question. I know his father. He's a news person in Puerto Rico, a very respected one, and Ismael Torres. So I'm glad to have you here. Steps. Well, I think the tide, as you described it, is part of an attitude that a new generation assume that, that it is. I don't want you to think that I'm saying that I'm from your generation, but the attitude was, this is my time. I'm suffering the consequences of the decision of my parents, of my grandparents. Now it is my time. So that's what I think that the summer of 2019 was very important, because I saw during the marches and during the protests, I saw a lot of people, parents with their sons and grandmothers with their grandsons or daughters, and they came to me and told me, Juan, I've never been in a protest in my life, but I'm here because of her or because of him. And they signaled their young generation of the daughters. And I also think that I've been in so many that I was like checking list, and they wanted to say, you don't remember me, but because I haven't been here never before. But all things aside, I think that time and that attitude is still there. But you bring up a subject that it is very important. What is the reaction of the political parties that now see and think that their days are numbered? Popular Democratic Party and the New Progressive Party, for the first time since the creation of the Electoral Commission in Puerto Rico, haven't been visiting schools. They haven't been visiting colleges to help young people to register to vote. They wanted to make it more difficult for the new generation to register. They have closed the offices of Junta de Inscripción, the offices of registration in Puerto Rico. So what you are bringing up is very important, because it is important to educate, it's important to have this dialogue in an intellectual level, in an academic platform, but at the end is action that will get us a result. And action, as Maximino said in his question, what are we doing? Are we registering young people? Are we explaining what we want to achieve? Are we educating about the vision that we have for Puerto Rico? When I presented Patria Nueva as como un proyecto de país, I said, I think that governmental affairs should respond to the defense of human rights and the dignity of each person. That's the obligation of a government, of how I saw it. And then you can speak about economic development, health services, education, access to education. That's a point of view. Others have other point of views, and that process of education is very important. We're doing it, but it's not enough. It's never enough. So it's, as you said, it's you have access to Twitter, Facebook, all the things that the internet now can bring up. Some of them are bad, but some of them can be used for good things. These past midterm elections, I think Generation Z brought up a new form of how to communicate, to mobilize, to register, to go vote. For example, one of the strategies, one of the things that they do in Puerto Rico is that the Popular Democratic Party and the New Progressive Party instruct their funcionarios de colegio, their electoral officials in the electoral colleges, to act very slowly in the process, so lines form, and when young people go to vote, they see long lines and they will leave. The old people go very early in the morning. They tend to vote for the Popular Democratic Party and New Progressive Party, so they create an environment so you do not vote. So you have to keep that in mind. Every obstacle that you will find in the process of how we can change Puerto Rico, they will try to make it even harder. And that's something that we have to keep in mind because, as you said, it's good to have the tie. It's good to have the attitude. It's good to have the will for change. But there are going to be obstacles, and you shouldn't be deterred by it. On the contrary, even more determined to confront those obstacles and to do what you have to do to make a change. So thank you, Iman.
Thank you, Mayor. Two more questions, and then we
Grab each order.
Okay, yeah.
Grab each order.
next event, we'll do it 3 hours. Okay? We have as a prerogative, we have to we want to talk and everything, but we'll go to the conversation outside. Okay, 2 questions.
So beyond education and making young people register to vote, what other practical and specific efforts will your party make moving forward to create a shift in the colonial mindset that is so pervasive in Puerto Rican society and so ingrained in our country, where kids are taught in school that Christopher Columbus discovered Puerto Rico and that most people believe in that? What practical efforts will your party make moving forward for that?
Well, every aspect of our political action is goes hand in hand with trying to demystify it or to ¿cómo se dice? Descorrer el velo. To unveil the lies by which the historic, political, social, economic narratives in Puerto Rico have been constructed. But your question, if I understand it, if it is, what are we doing within the communities to change the mindset of the people and the colonial structure of their minds?
How you can continue changing the conversation and changing colonial mindset?
Oh, well,
Puerto Rico.
I think education is part of it, but also to, let me see, how can I say this? I think you can try to educate people, but that will get you so far. If people are living in a bubble, which was the way we were living as a people for so long. I remember I visited years ago a municipality in Yauco. I was invited to talk to Club de Leones. They still exist. And I explained everything about independence, and I explained everything about economics, and about the transition process. when I finished, one gentleman raised his hand and told me, you know what? That sounds pretty good. I am not an independentista, but if you get the president of the United States and all the congressional people to sign it, then I will vote for it. What I'm telling you is, now it's different. Now we are living the consequences, the material consequences, the problems with energy, the problem with the oversight board. We are living the problem of lack of access to health services too. So it sounds tragic, but sometimes it is a way that you can make people shift their point of view or their minds, which is now they are suffering consequences directly from colonialism. And now when you talk to the people and you present a proyecto de país como Patria Nueva, and you mobilize young people to inspire other generations, and you go to the communities and you talk to the people, it's something that you have to keep building up. It's not something for one day every 4 years. That's what we're doing. I mean, after the election, I went and I've been in what I call Patria Nueva en tu comunidad. I'm visiting every municipality, barrios, sectores que están asociados a non-profits in Puerto Rico, non-governmental organizations, trying to build up on what we are facing, and what we are facing is the consequences of our political system, of our undemocratic colonial status. So that's what we are doing, specifically, wow, it's been 2 hours. But we're trying to organize the youth of the party to be a very important part of it. That's what I can tell you about. I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but what we are doing is something we haven't done before. As a political party, the Puerto Rican Independence Party, as an independence movement, has suffered, as other independentistas in Puerto Rico, persecution, all the narrative, being in prison, las carpetas. So for a long time, because of the interest of the United States in Puerto Rico, we were the enemy. For a long time, the Puerto Rican Independence Party had to do politics like when you are in a castle under siege. You're trying to resist, but the idea to open the doors and try to do something outside the walls of the castle, it wasn't possible. Now, for the first time, I was a candidate for governor in 2012. Yo tuve el gran apoyo of 2.7%. Now I was the candidate for governor of Puerto Rico. I got 14% of the vote. That changes the possibilities. Now we are not a political party under siege. Now we can have a dialogue with other people. We can look if alliances for political specific agendas are possible, even electoral alliances. So it is something new that requires from us as a party to act as we have never done before. Do it without, los masones le llaman los antiguos límites, without crossing the ancient barriers. For the Puerto Rican Independence Party, our ancient barriers are the independence of Puerto Rico and the claim for the right of the people of Puerto Rico of self-determination. Beyond that, now we can talk about a lot of other things, and we can act in a lot of different ways. So this is something new, and it's something that I'm very hopeful is gonna be part of a great change in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Think about a very quick reflection to end. We have to end, but I also wanted to mention to you in your question, I think we have to decolonize both, like minds in Puerto Rico, and also like we have to educate and decolonize minds here in the US, specifically in Puerto Rico, you know, and this is personally, like, I think if we start decolonizing in different other areas like energy and trying to get energy independence, energy security, the other one is agriculture, and like kind of improving our food security. Those are areas if you start like improving them, you know, like you'll start like people start seeing that we can, nosotros, como decimos en español, nosotros podemos, nosotros mismos, ¿verdad? Defendernos. Projects like Casa Pueblo, in Juntas, it's a project of energy independence. Those are things I think that will help people in Puerto Rico start believing that they can, you know, they can do the things by themselves, and they will start decolonizing their minds. And here in the US, we have to keep the conversation going on this, and that was what Juan mentioned on these, all these political status bills that are being discussed in Congress. I hope that in the future, we'll have some kind of like Black Lives Matter movement around the topic of US imperialism and US colonialism, where the topic of Puerto Rico and the territories of the US are going to come to the mainstream media, you know, and the US and the big, you know, like lawmakers, the president, the Congress people will have to take a stance and express themselves about the topic of colonialism. And for that, we have to continue pushing. And there are organizations, the Puerto Rican Independence Party is in Puerto Rico, they have a diaspora group, but as we mentioned, there are diaspora organizations that are doing that work, trying to educate Congress, push for political status bills in Congress, and keep the conversation going until the time comes that we never know when that time is going to come. So we're going to finish. Apologies for the questions that we couldn't answer. Apologies to the people in the Zoom. We can follow up somehow, you know, offline and answer those questions. I just want to leave 30 seconds because I know it's going to be 1 minute.
Yeah.
Of a final reflection and take away from yourself. It can be Spanish, English, Spanglish, and with that we will end.
Well, first of all, Edil, thank you very much for this opportunity to the organizers. It has been a great dialogue. Pero yo quiero aprovechar mi última reflexión, porque creo que he sido claro en lo demás que hemos conversado, porque veo en el salón muchas caras jóvenes y caras de jóvenes puertorriqueños. Y estoy seguro que su anhelo y su inspiración es la idea de poder volver a Puerto Rico y aportar en el proceso de transformación. Y yo les quiero decir lo siguiente, y no juzgo a aquellos que tendrán que por razones de su vida, tal vez no necesariamente volver de inmediato a Puerto Rico, habrá otros que sí podrán. En cualquiera de los dos escenarios solamente le digo lo siguiente. Hoy más que nunca Puerto Rico los necesita, no importa dónde estén. Nuestras fronteras no están delimitadas por nuestra ubicación geográfica, nuestras fronteras están extendidas en donde se encuentra un puertorriqueño o una puertorriqueña que eleve la bandera de Puerto Rico con orgullo y nos represente con dignidad. Y eso está en las manos de cada uno y cada uno de ustedes. Y el país tiene una enorme esperanza de que podemos reconstruirnos gracias a que hay una generación que ya se probó. Y eso es algo extraordinario. Pero les anticipo lo siguiente. Van a fracasar. Y eso es importante que lo asimilen. ¿Por qué? Porque eso es parte de la vida. Lo determinante es que jamás permitan que un fracaso momentáneo se convierta en una derrota permanente. Los fracasos ocurren, pero no deben ser la justificación para rendirse. Y yo sé que nosotros como pueblo hemos tenido unos grandes triunfos, pero hemos tenido unos fracasos. Hemos sido siempre capaces de levantarnos sobre nuestros propios pies. Y como individuos, ustedes ahora que representan esta nueva generación, tienen esa enorme responsabilidad y obligación. Así que acepten que habrá obstáculos, que puede uno caer y uno levantarse, sacudirse el polvo y seguir hacia adelante cuando ese objetivo final está bien claro. Y lo otro es que en ese trayecto de vida que ustedes tendrán, no olviden nunca llevar en el bolsillo un instrumento importante. Les pueden faltar otros instrumentos, pero hay uno que no pueden nunca dejar atrás. Siempre lleven con ustedes una brújula moral. Y eso no es racional. Una brújula moral es aquello que estomacalmente su instinto y su pasión le dice para que en los retos que enfrenten no les pase como al poeta: en medio de mi vida me encontré perdido en una selva oscura por haberme apartado del camino recto. Y si ustedes siguen ese norte bien definido, aceptando que tendrán tropiezos, pero siempre con una voluntad de levantarse, y que esa voluntad indomable esté inspirada en lo que ustedes representan para su patria, su nación y Puerto Rico, ustedes ya son una generación victoriosa. Yo les aseguro que sí, al final van a triunfar. Yo les agradezco mucho esta oportunidad.
Oh my God, thank you so much. The conversation has been absolutely incredible. We are so grateful. Gracias, Juan. But before you guys leave, I want to leave you guys really quickly with Leonard Cisneros. He is from the LATAM organization and he is the graduate representative. And with that, we'll end for tonight and you can head over to the reception. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Quickly, I'd just like to say thank you, gentlemen, for the engaging conversation. I'll be brief because I know everyone is hungry. I just have a few next steps for everyone. Our first step is please make sure to leave the room clean, leave it how you found it. The second step, to connect with Prasa. You can follow them on Instagram, Prasa_GWU. We'll be continuing the political series. This third step is to follow LATAM at GW, at LATAM at GW on Instagram as well for events we host here, covering the entire region of Latin America. And the fourth step is to please step outside for reception to fill your belly for dinner. Thank you. Also, if you have a sign-up sheet, please pass it to the front. Thank you.
Whoever has the Bug PR sign-up sheet, please pass it over to the front. Does anyone in the back have the Bug PR sign-up sheet?